My name is Nasser Mashni and I'm from Deir Dabwan and Jerusalem.
My name is Faris and I'm from Hebron in Bir Saba, and you've tuned into Diaspora Discussion, where we centre the voices of Palestinians about the topic of Palestine.
My father was ethnically cleansed in 1948, arrested by Zionist terror gangs in 47. His girlfriend at the time helped him escape from, we're not sure whether it was the Irgun or the Stern gang that arrested him, but that Zionist terror camp that he was held in, he was helped to escape by his then girlfriend, fiance, if you will, who was a Palestinian Jew. Because the Palestinian experience is not complete, being terrorized by Zionists in the terror gangs pre-mandate Palestine ending and the state of Israel being declared. He was then imprisoned by the Jordanians. Came to Australia, where he met my mother and I was born. So I have the unique opportunity at my sort of age, because there's many more Australian Palestinians now where, lay Australians and Zionists have a real challenge with me because I look like them, but I sound like us. I'm an Australian born, Australian thinking. I think in the first, my thought patterns and language, etc., are quintessentially Australian. And it's a real challenge because the Orientalism that Edward Said described and the dehumanization of the brown body works when the brown body looks like the Taliban, looks like Al-Qaeda, looks like what the stereotypical brown person looks like. And I don't sound like that. I don't look like that. And it's disarming and confusing. And increasingly the world over, particularly in the West, there are more and more Palestinians that are able to fit that dynamic and create a bridge between the lies of Zionism and the humanity of the Palestinians.
Could you tell us a bit more about your father's story, being exiled forcefully from Palestine?
Yeah, so my father was born in the 20s, so he was an adult and was part of the resistance. He was at Al-Qastal with Abdul Qadir Husseini when he was martyred. He was part of the resistance, which is why the Jordanians arrested him after he escaped from the Zionist terror gangs.
My grandfather was also fought with Abdul Qadir Husseini as well.
So I was right.
They might have known each other.
Could be your father, yeah. So he was always part of the resistance, which, when he, escaped again the Jordanians, ended up in Lebanon at the American University of Beirut, and then from there to Australia. Thankfully, he got to go home a couple of times. He got to return and go back to his village, and to visit Palestine. Never had the opportunity to fulfill his lifelong dream, obviously, for us to return, for him to return. And then, his dying wish was to be buried in our ancestral land next to his mother and father. Unfortunately, that was denied him. He knew that was a possibility. He brought back some soil from Palestine, from underneath the tree where he used to sit with his father and grandfather. And we sprinkled that soil on him here. But inshallah, one day, when Palestine's free, we'll take him home.
This is story is like so symbolic of the Palestinian experience. My grandfather, similar to your father, was not able to return to Palestine. He ended up buying a plot of land in Jordan, which overlooked Palestine.
Wow.
And that was the closest he could get. In terms of your story, your father went to Australia, and did he marry an Australian woman, or was she also a Palestinian or Arab?
No, he married my mother. She was Lebanese.
Okay.
And interestingly, it's one of my favorite stories. My father warned her. He said, you need to know something. I'm already married. And my mother was, a gorgeous Lebanese woman, as most Lebanese women are. And she said, well, what are you doing courting me if you're already married? And he said, well, I'm married to Palestine. So you're just going to have to understand that you'll be my second wife. And my mother said it would have been easier to compete with a woman. She could never compete with Palestine. So I'm a Pelbo, which is half Palestinian, half Lebanese. So in Australia, we call Well, I call Palestinians Pelos and Lebanese are Lebos. So I'm a Pelbo.
Palbo.
But we're Wulad Hashem, we're children of Greater Syria, of the Levant.
Yeah. I mean, before these borders, the distinction wasn't so uh, distinct.
No,
Uh,
there was no distinction. I mean, we our food and our culture, our dance, our song, our poetry. I mean, there was distinct dialects and food tastes, and if you're by the sea, obviously, if you're Haifa Akka, you ate more fish, and if you were inland, you ate more stews, and munsaf and stuff. So no, there's we are one people. We are one people, and the reality is that we've allowed Zionists, we've allowed Western hegemony, we've allowed these separatists to create identities to divide us. And, just the reality of humanity is given the opportunity to lead or to be seduced by power, proximity to power. Human beings are seduced by that. And whether it was, somebody saying, you're a Christian Maronite, that makes you much different to a Christian Orthodox, which is different to a Samaritan, which is different to a Durzi, which is different to a Shia, which is different to a Sunni, which is different to a Durzi, which is different to a Baha'i, which is different to, Alawite. Seriously? Well, I grew up, my mother's Christian, my father's Muslim. I married a Muslim woman. We're raising our children Islamically. Both my brothers married Catholic women. How anyone might choose to celebrate God is an individual choice. An individual choice. It isn't something that we should allow anybody to divide us by.
I'd like to return to your father and his story. You said he fought with Abdul Qadir al-Husseini. Now, whilst there was a lot of resistance in Palestine in the early 20th century, and then obviously we know with 1936 there was a crushing of the Palestinian uprising against the British occupation, and that led to the killing or exile, or imprisonment of over 10% of all Palestinian males. So that was a huge blow, and I'm sure it seems like your father probably lived through that, or definitely lived through that. But not all Palestinians took up arms. What inspired or pushed your father to decide he needed to take up arms?
I can't tell you that there's any individual thing. My dad was born in 1926, so in 36 he was 10 years old. I can't tell you that there was a trigger. I know that his family was against it. He was, he was a rebellious youth. Yeah, he was. He left Erdogan. I said Erdogan and Jerusalem. He was mostly a Jerusalemite. He grew up in. The greatest university in the world is the universe itself, is what he would say to us. And his experiences were in Jerusalem. And, he was, as a kid, he used to, steal bullets from British officers to bring back to the resistance, to the Palestinians. And then from there, he just was involved, in supply as a kid, because, he was like a street kid and knew the alleys and knew the ways to get around, and was very wily. And then, as he matured, and that was just a natural progression to defend one's land and one's honor. And, we have always been so very proud of him. And, I was asked by one of our shock jocks here, was your father part of the resistance? And I said, of course, yes, he was. And, I think I'm part of the resistance. We should all be resisting oppression. We should all be resisting genocide. We should all be resisting apartheid. And I hope that you join me in resisting those evils. Look, there's only one way to talk to those people, and it's bluntly and truthfully.
Yeah, especially at this stage of 82%
Yeah.
of Israelis in a recent poll said they would support the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, and over 56% said they would support the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in 48 Palestine, so their neighbors, essentially. I don't know how anyone can suggest at this stage that the option is for us to come together and hold hands and have a peaceful dialogue and, just let bygones be bygones. The truth is that we need to resist injustice, and in order for peace to exist in the region, justice must be served first.
Of course.
And this is something that, you know,
Look, Curtis, I think one of the things that we should be very clear on is that there is a difference between us and Zionism. Yeah. The reality is the thing that disturbs Zionists and Israelis so much is that on a level playing field, I mean, look at what's left of the resistance now. Yeah, 20 months later, they are repurposing spent munitions. They, creating booby traps, stealing supplies, etc. The pictures you see the resistance, how emaciated they are, and they're in thongs, slippers. I'm not sure what you call them in the UK. Props, yeah.
flip-flops.
Running between buildings, in the barest minimum of protective clothing, and they're fighting a nuclear armed state with every level of support from the world. The UK today, I saw, was refueling Israeli fighter jets as they were flying to and from Tehran, let alone the spy missions that have been coming out of Cyprus. The conveyor belt of weaponry from the United States has not stopped for 615 days, 24/7 supply and rearmament. What disturbs them, kills them, they can't understand is why we won't give up. That if on a level playing field, if there was a level playing field, we had a rock each, a stick each, a sword each, a gun each, on a level playing field, the Palestinians would win by lunchtime. By lunchtime. More so, and this is the important point, Faris, more so, we would win by lunchtime and our taters would be making the mansaf for dinner. Our capacity to love, to include, and if you go back to the stories of your grandfather and my father, when they came just before the Holocaust, just after the Holocaust, we embraced them. Palestine has always been a sanctuary for those that have been oppressed and murdered, etc. Whether it was from North Africa, whether it was the Armenians, wherever they might have been, the Palestine as the Holy Land, Palestine as a repository for those that are fleeing has always been the case. Now, our fight is with Zionism, a settler colonial ideology of white supremacism, of hate. Now, we have to be rid of Zionism. There is no question. That ideology has to end. And anybody that wants to be a Zionist cannot stay in Palestine from the river to the sea. All of it will be free. Now, unlike in South Africa, and the only criticism I have of Nelson Mandela, and we talk about the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, about the fight against apartheid in South Africa and against in Palestine, is when they had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Kumbaya, we're going to live together, shake hands, like you were talking about before, Faris. What didn't happen is there was no accountability, no redistribution of wealth, no accountability for the disasters. There's going to be accountability. There is going to be accountability. And how that looks, it'll be smarter people than you and I that determine it, but there will be a redistribution. Every Palestinian will be afforded the opportunity to return to their homes and must be given compensation and must be given their lands back. Now, anyone that doesn't want that, they can leave. They can leave. And if you are prepared to pay, say sorry, and do whatever time is determined is necessary based on your complicity, then you can stay. The reality, Faris, and something we have to come to terms with as human beings. There are people who have lived there now for 4 or 5 generations. Yeah, they are no longer Polish or Lithuanian or Iraqi or Syrian or wherever their great people came from. Yeah, and there were many Palestinian Jews who were anti-Zionists, but now their grandchildren and great-grandchildren are not. Yeah, if they cannot reconcile with equality, no supremacy, and humanity, and pay, out you go.
Yeah, and for me, thinking about the potential, dissemination of justice in the future, what would be helpful is if there was some sort of international system that would uphold justice across the world. But as we see today, the so-called international system that we have is crumbling beneath our feet, and it's been exposed for the
It hasn't
farce
crumbled
that it
beneath, it
is.
hasn't crumbled beneath our feet. As Palestinians, we've always known that it's a lie. As
100%.
Palestinians, we've always known it was a lie, whether it is the advisory opinion, because the resolution to partition Palestine was a General Assembly resolution, which has no basis in law. There is no Security Council resolution. If it was based on law, there is no Security Council resolution to partition Palestine in the first instance. In the second instance, Israel was admitted into as a country into the United Nations, accepted by the world, but a condition on its admission was the full application of UN Resolution 194. Now, 194 is the right of return. If Israel had abided by 194, you and I wouldn't be in Melbourne and London. We'd be in Al Khalil and Derdewan or Uts, or maybe Haifa, Akka, or wherever it might have been. We wouldn't be so, you know, removed from where our ancestors toiled the land, loved the land, and where they're buried and where we're going.
No, 100%. I agree with that. I think my point was that even though this so-called system has disseminated injustice towards the Palestinians specifically and to others in other ways, it's a system that everyone kind of pays some sort of lip service to, at least, right? And the genocide that we've seen, the Holocaust that Israel has committed against the Palestinians, enacted against the Palestinians with unabashed support from the West, with UN resolution being vetoed by the most powerful in order to continue the genocide. This system, once it crumbles, once it is, completely tossed aside because of how useless it is, no longer can any supposed international body have oversight on how justice is dispelled.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's dead. Like, the only people that still talk about it are people in the global north, and I mean, who's that? They are yesterday's empirists: France, Germany, America, England. Like, nobody believes it's real anymore. I mean, these guys keep talking about it, whether it's our prime minister here, rules-based order, international law. I mean, here's the repercussions in the future. I mean, nobody's, whether they've done the math or what they think it might be, how they're tenuously holding on to Western hegemony. When Russia invaded Ukraine, and then the Americans, canceled their SWIFT code, so they couldn't do international transfers. Their athletes were banned from participating in stuff. We started, sending them munitions, as did you guys from the UK. Everybody changed their Facebook profile to Ukrainian flags and etc. All that bull dust. The Chinese wrote down, okay, this is what'll happen. Here's the playbook. Okay, team, we need to develop and evolve strategies so that we can be ready, so that when we take Taiwan back, we know what the West is going to do to us. Now, when Israel genocided, holocausted Gaza, as you said, turned it into a slaughterhouse, there's not even words for what's happened in Gaza. The Chinese tore that up and said, here's the new one. They're just terrorists. There's tunnels. We can do whatever we want now because the playbook has been torn up. The international rules order, democracy, all of the bull dust that the West espoused and then walked away from, that everybody has seen. And when we say everybody, we should be conscious that when we're talking about, most of Africa, most of Asia, most of South America, the global South is overwhelmingly more humans, more economy, and more of the future. Yeah, and this is Gaza has exposed the Western Empire for what it is, and that it's in decline. These are the last gasps of Western imperialism and Western hegemony. The new system that we, as the world is rebuilding, 500,000 people coming out once a month or more often in London, and protests in every city in Australia. We protest, and all over the world. They're not just protesting for Palestine, they're protesting about the whole system, that they can't afford housing, that healthcare is so terrible. All of the things, the intersectional struggles that sit on top of each other, that have been created because of predator capitalism pushing us down, commodifying us, turning us into materialists, disconnecting us from communities, creating individualism rather than communities. That new world, inshallah, when we build it, the people in charge of it might reconstitute a United Nations, but it won't have a Security Council where the United States can say no. It won't have those processes where the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court can issue arrest warrants, and then the president of a country can cancel their internet services and their email accounts, which has happened to Karim Khan, yeah? And his sanctions on him and his family had assets frozen. The absurdity, the absolute absurdity of our highest court of law on earth being dictated to by, Donald Trump. It's just obscene. And so Gaza has exposed that hypocrisy, has exposed the West for how immoral it actually is, depending on how far your skin tone is from blonde hair, blue-eyed, and white. Because you can get the full benefit of all of those laws. Full benefit. Australia offered to take 20,000 Ukrainians. We took 7,000 or 9,000 Israelis. I mean, what are they running from? But only 1,000 Palestinians, and rejected close to 7,000 or 8,000 Palestinians. I mean, the absurdity, the absolute absurdity.
And it's a settler colony as well. It's not like it's a
100%.
European nation.
Just like Palestine was once 100% indigenous Palestinian, this place was once 100% indigenous blackfellas. Our indigenous, the indigenous crew call themselves blackfellas. What the difference here, and the difference in Aotearoa, which is New Zealand, or Turtle Island, North America, Canada, etc., is that Israel was the last settler colonial enterprise, and they never got a chance to do it properly. And quote unquote properly is where you vanquish and you get the indigenous people to like a small percentage. In Australia, in this colony, it's 3%. In the United States, it's infinitesimally smaller than that. Reservations, stripping of resources, introduction of drugs and alcohol, domestic abuse, taking children away, putting them in schools where God knows what happens to them. I mean, some of the stories out of the Canada schools, where they've found mass graves of children that were stolen from Indigenous Canadians. They didn't get to do it. And this is why so many Indigenous people and people of colour see the struggle of Palestine, for justice with Palestine, as a struggle that they need to embrace, because liberation for Palestine will be liberation for them.
You've hinted there about what seems to be your politics, and I wanted to ask you, is the fact that you're Palestinian and your experience as a Palestinian, is that what informed your politics, or is the development of your politics independent of you being Palestinian?
I'm not even sure which is the chicken or the egg, Habib. First, we grew up in a house. My father was absolutely a socialist, believed. And I did a speak the other day in a regional centre in Melbourne. We believe as Muslims that the Jews and Christians are children of the book, as we are. And whenever, depending on the audience, I speak about different things. But if we just talk about the Nabi Musa, the prophet Moses, going and receiving the 10 Commandments, yeah? And if, as a human being, you were to live the 10 Commandments, just the basic ones: don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, don't murder, don't. As a human being, if you lived that, if you said that Faris has got a loaf of bread, Nasser's got no bread, and Faris cuts the bread in half and we get half a loaf each. Nasser's house burnt down, Faris has got a spare room and he's his neighbor, Faris welcomes him into his house. These ideals of sharing, looking after, of community, of commonality, not individuality, which is today. These are intrinsically socialist ideals. Yeah, the Quran teaches us these things, not to profit via interest from, not to not to subjugate, not to steal. All of these things are intrinsically who we are. Now, if you come into and you see what the world has become in the West, and I know I've grown up in the West, and my father endeavored as best he could to keep us thinking Palestine and live as we live in Palestine. I live in a multi-generational home. My brother lives downstairs with his family. I live upstairs with my family. My mum lives in her little unit as well. There's 11 of us here with one street number, but everybody's got their own kitchen and everybody's got their own house and door. We've endeavored to keep that sense of family and community as separate to that individual materialistic capitalistic ideology. That said, I'm a human being and none of us is perfect. Have I been seduced by the pursuit of shiny stuff? Absolutely. This is, what happens when you're in the West. You work hard and sometimes you stray from your deen and you try and remember and come back. But my politics are broadly socialist, but it's rooted in deep humanity and the humanity of and the equality of all of our experiences, whomever we are, however we celebrate, or if we celebrate God.
Let's go back to your upbringing in Australia. I'm not sure how things are in terms of discrimination, and especially when you grew up in the, I'm guessing the 70s and 80s. Were you distinguished from your peers? Like, did you feel like you were different, either by the way you looked and, your name, etc.? Is that something, or was the environment inclusive, so to speak?
No, Australia's racist today. It's 2025. They say it's the most successful multicultural country in the world. And it is, it's a very low base of multicultural countries. And depending, this country is vast. It is huge. And depending where you are in this country, you have different experiences of how much people have assimilated versus how much people have, kept a separate identity from. We grew up arguably quite poor. And I would say, it'd be very tough for somebody to say that we weren't very poor, but I'll say quite poor. We were rich because we were loved unconditionally, embraced every day. But we grew up in a corner store. In Australia, we call them milk bars. It's a convenience shop.
Right.
There was a bell on the front door, and people bought newspapers and milk and bread and, convenience items from us. But we grew up in that milk bar. That convenience store was in a very salubrious suburb in Melbourne, very rich suburb, a very white suburb by the beach. And it was very clear. It was made very clear to us in every interaction we had, wherever it might have been, in the sporting clubs, at schools, etc., that we were, quote unquote, others. We were the milk bar boy. We were the boys, my brothers and I, the boys with a funny name, funny skin color, funny religion. And so we were the last to be picked at a football team. Often didn't get invited to friends' parties because they didn't want the convenience shop kid at their birthday party. My best friend lived not 50 meters from our shop, and his mum would drive past me looking sternly forward as I was at the bus stop to catch the bus to the same school she was taking her child to.
Wow.
And, we'd walk out of class together and I'd say, "See you, Malcolm," as he got into his car, his mum's car, and he drove home. And I'd catch the bus to catch a train, to catch a bus, to get home. And an hour later, we were playing football together, kicking a ball to each other. He'd had the benefit of being home 40 minutes earlier than me. And then this woman would come into the shop and buy a bottle of milk and say, "Would you like a bag for that, Mrs. Fortune?" There you go. She'd leave and she'd say, "Thank you, Nasser," as she left. And the next day, she'd drive past me, eyes forward, wouldn't look at me at the bus stop. And, a million of those experiences. I'm thankful that where we live, where Melbourne is the best city in Australia from a multicultural perspective. There's been a lot of assimilation, but also and participation, but also unique pockets of individual cultures where you can experience an authenticity in food or culture, whatever it might be. So Melbourne is the best city in Australia, and I'd argue outside of Palestine in the world. I've travelled quite a bit. There's not many places in the world that do multiculturalism the way we do, but we are still very racist.
Well, I'd have to visit and watch what neighborhoods I wander into. I want you, if you can, to explain the term WOG to our audience.
Oh,
It's an Australian term, right?
yeah. So I mean, it's an acronym for Western Oriental Gentleman, was where it first started, and as I understand it, uh, so Australian diggers, soldiers, were in World War One part of the British police, and the charge of the Light Horse Brigade, Beersheba, from the Sinai through to Damascus in liberating the Arab world from the Ottomans. Unbeknownst to us, Balfour had signed the Balfour Declaration a couple of days earlier. Those Aussie diggers, soldiers, referred to us as WOGs. That came here, and WOG became the colloquialism for anyone that was olive-skinned, So whether you're Greek or Italian, Macedonian, Lebanese, Palestinian, whatever, Syrian, we were all called WOGs. And I think in the mid 80s, we took the word back. There was comedians that, there was some comedians and they were called the Wog Boys, and they did comedy shows and stripped it of its power. Similarly to what has happened in the States with the N-word. White people here don't use the word Wog anymore. It's been taken off them. We might look, people my generation use it amongst each other, but my children wouldn't. I mean, they might have heard it, but they wouldn't use it. It's not really it's not a colloquial term anymore.
It's fallen out of fashion.
Yeah. Well, I'm in my 50s, late 50s.
Don't look a day over 45.
Yeah, I think this light is doing me good, Faris.
I'd like to talk about your advocacy work. You've taken part in quite an extensive amount of work. You've helped either found or you are a part of, as in leadership, of multiple organizations. Maybe we'll go through them if you can.
Of course, yeah. So my dad, here's a good story. So my dad was maybe the first Palestinian in Australia. Yeah. And I'm saying maybe because I don't know if anybody else was. I will say that he was the first real Palestinian in Australia, because I don't know what your experience has been in the UK, Faris, but there's a lot of Palestinians that leave Palestine and smell foreign air and they cease to be Palestinian. Yeah. They become Lebanese or Jordanian or whatever it might be, but they're not Palestinian. In fact, I met
think for the Palestinians in Lebanon, maybe it's a bit difficult considering they're forced to live in the refugee camps. And
No, I'm not talking about Lebanese Palestinians. I'm not talking about the Palestinians in Lebanon. I'm talking Palestinians that are in the UK.
They refer to them. I haven't come across that. No.
Okay, so in Australia, and maybe because we're so far away, we took a lot of the Palestinians here, and there isn't that many. We think maybe 50,000 or 80,000. Most of the Palestinians that came here came from the Gulf post 91, first Gulf War, but also 76 civil war in Lebanon, and then 82 War of Lebanon. And they came here and wow, this government, Australia was then and still is, compared to the United States, intrinsically social. Yeah. So we have Medicare like you have the NHS. Universities were for free until, sort of a couple of decades ago. Now the fee, you have to pay a fee, but it's a deferred tax that's added to your tax rate. So instead of paying 30 cents, you pay 32 cents till you repay pay your debt. There's, support for housing, support for unemployment, etc. So it's broadly a social country. And so these Palestinians that have escaped wherever they've escaped from, because the reality of a Palestinian experience, many of them are not economic migrants. They're not choosing to go somewhere, but they've escaped Iraq or they've escaped Kuwait or wherever it might be, and they've come here. It's a liberal country. Nobody really cares where you're from as long as you stick to your lane. And so many of the Palestinians that came to Australia when I came here, they asked me where I was coming from, and I said I was Palestinian. They said it's not on the checkbox. Where did you leave from? And their last point of departure was Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, wherever it might have been. They go, Lebanon, you're Lebanese. And then they went, where are you from? And as a kid, I'd say I'm Palestinian, and they'd go, Pakistan? I said, no, Palestine. Nobody knew what Palestine was. And so they're here, and they might have said it once, Palestine, and then they said Lebanon. They went, okay, you're Lebanese. No worries. And then there was no barrier, no challenge to being Lebanese. As a Palestinian in the 70s, we were, Layla Khalid was hijacking planes, yeah? So, being Palestinian was a lot harder in the 70s and 80s. In the 90s, into the second intifada, it was tough being a Palestinian, yeah? So if you're here and this is going on and you've come out of those places and they said you're Lebanese, and you say to your kids, we're Lebanese. I was in Perth last week doing some work with some people over there, and I met a guy who was in his 30s who only found out he was Palestinian 2 years ago. For 35 years, his parents had told him that they were Lebanese because they wanted to, quote unquote, protect him from being Palestinian, as opposed to, the way we were raised was, you are so lucky that you're here. You will be Palestinian every day. You have a responsibility to speak for Palestine because you've been afforded an opportunity and a lifestyle that Palestinians can't dream of. And when you think about the heroicness of the resistance of our people in Gaza, in the West Bank, inside 48, holding onto their lands, dealing with the abject racism and apartheid. This is October 6th and backwards, yeah? Not since, but October 6th and backwards. To be a Palestinian in the West, to have a Western passport, and then to say that you're Lebanese or Egyptian because you don't want the state of being Palestinian, well, you don't deserve to be Palestinian, yeah? And so I say my dad was the first Palestinian because there was no Palestinians. There might have been Palestinians here that might have come earlier or later or whatever, but none of them represented as Palestinians. And so I gave my first rally speech in 1982 when Israel invaded Lebanon, yeah? And I spoke to 6 people and I was related to all 6 of them. That was our movement. Dad, he would constitute bodies, the General Union of Opinion Workers, the General Union of, and in Australia, to create a body, you needed 3 people, a chair, a secretary, and a treasurer or something. I can't remember what the 3 people were. And he was, the chair, Mum was the secretary, and I was the ordinary member. That's right. But I was 6 or 7 years old. I was a member of the General Union of Palestinian Workers. So we never were not Palestinian. We were never not outwardly, absolutely Palestinian. Dad's number plate was FLSTEN, Philistine. Our car number plates now are Jenin, JENIN, Jenin 1, Jenin 2, Jenin 3. We are, the front door of our house says, we shall return, Der Yassin 8448, and we've got olive trees everywhere, we are so Palestinian as to, like people come from Palestine and visit us and go, you're more Palestinian than us. I go, no, we're not, because we're here. And one of the things that I've spoken about this before in other places that has happened since October 7 is to see what I call October 8 activists. You and I were doing this in October 6, Faris, yeah? But I'm sure you will have seen many of our community come out that you'd never seen before. And these are October 8 Palestinians. And welcome. Took you a while, but you're here now. There's no going back. And some of them are naive to the politics and, not really sure of everything, but we can teach them, and it isn't really that hard. to get a PhD in Palestine. But our job is as leaders of movements all over the world is to harness that energy and channel it to the most effective way to make real difference. But I'm very, very excited about the Palestinian movement. I believe that it is the smallest it's ever going to be today, and it's huge. I never dreamed that the movement for justice for Palestine, I'm talking here locally in an Australian context, but also what I've seen all over the world, wherever those rallies might be, and actions and efforts. I mean, like in Canada, they got the JNF lost its tax deductibility status. I mean, this is huge. Yeah. I mean, it's nothing really great, but, in Australia, we've enacted sanctions against Smotrich and Ben Gvir. I mean, we could have done that on October 6th. These two guys are Nazis. They're fascists straight up. But to do that in a country that is very Zionist, things are moving. But I've spoken all over the country on media outlets, whatever, to tens, hundreds of thousands of people. I've addressed rallies of 100,000 people here. We never dreamed that the movement would be that big. And this is as small as it's ever going to be, Faris. Every day, more people are joining us. And every day, the movement for justice for Palestine grows. And, if we had a time machine, Faris, I can guarantee you that the Zionist project, won't make 100.
Inshallah ta'ala. There's some people who think 2027 is the year. I don't know if you've heard if heard this theory.
I prefer 2027 to 2048. So I'll take that one every day.
There's a few things behind it. One is there's kind of like some esoteric kind of mathematical reading of the Quran or something, and it says like 2027. I mean, I'm not sure how. These are kind of, people like to predict things and whatnot.
Can I tell you something? My dad used to tell a joke. He used to say, if you drive past an Arab house at 3:00 in the morning, it can only be one of three things. It's a Lebanese guy counting money.
Yeah.
A Syrian working out who he's going to conspire against. Well, number three, a Palestinian talking politics.
Yeah.
The reality is we will look at anything, any sort of numerology, any sort of cosmology or whatever. The sooner we get to go home, the better.
Yeah. But there's one thing which is interesting, which is a fear that the Zionists have, the Israeli Jews have, which is something that they call the curse of the 8th decade. Have you heard of this?
No.
Right. So this is something that's mentioned in among themselves. Is okay. They have this thing where in the supposed 2 previous Jewish kingdoms, after 8 decades, there was either a collapse or a severe decline. Both times. And so they're afraid that this will happen within, and then if this is the case, which who knows, maybe it is, that's 2027.
Inshallah.
So
look, I can tell you that I've been advocating political lobbying, so the Australia Palestine Advocacy Network, of which I'm the chair, the president, and before that, Australians for Palestine. I've been lobbying our politicians going to our 10 Downing Street for decades. And the conversations I've had have been as low as, can we increase aid? Can we get another refugee in? There's a family that's impacted, through to today. The conversations are, you need to sanction this place. You need to recall our ambassador. You need to expel their ambassador. We've got to end two-way military trade, etc. So the levels of conversation. But I claim to be the whitest Palestinian in Australia. And I say whitest because of my language and my education and my business world. I inhabit a space that most Australian Palestinians generally don't get to go to. And for years, I used to speak anywhere I could, any opportunity I got on apartheid and Zionism and Israel for what it is. And here we are 20 months later, and those people that I used to speak to now say to me, you weren't kidding, Nasser. Everything you said is true. And I'm like, why would you think I was lying? The normalcy, quote unquote, that Israel enjoyed on October 6th, that it was a normal country, like Sweden, like Norway, like New Zealand. It's just like a normal country. And, it's under attack from all of these really horrible people. That normalcy is gone. That normalcy is gone. There isn't anyone now who hasn't seen what Israel's doing. Citizen journalism, people, Bassam holding her video, Mu'taz holding his camera. There isn't anyone that the algorithms haven't given an opportunity for somebody to see something. Nobody can say they didn't know or hasn't seen. What they chose to do with what they saw is on them as individuals. Did they go, yeah, get them, Hamas, get them all? Or did they go, that's shocking, I'm going to do something, or that's shocking, I don't want to think about it? Most white people are in the, that's shocking, I don't want to think about it. Our job is to get them and say, you need to do something. Those people who are, that's shocking, I don't want to do anything about it. The next time somebody says they're from Israel, instead of them going on October 6th because they bought all of the lies, oh, Tel Aviv beaches, tell me about the nightlife. Oh, it's a gay haven. Oh, you've got wonderful technology. They're not going to buy that crap ever again. The videos we see of people kicking, of Israelis in Bangkok getting, thrown out of a restaurant, or getting, soldiers getting beaten up in Santiago or in Napoli in Italy or wherever it might be. Israelis are on holiday and they're not saying they're Israeli. They're saying they're Moroccan. Like, the lie has been torn to pieces. The milk is spilt. Israel never gets to be normal again. Inshallah, it's the 8-decade scenario. But today, the West is propping Israel up. It exists the way it exists because of the impunity and normalcy that the West confers on it. Israel still went to Eurovision. Israel still goes to the Olympics. Israel still, where was it? They were competing. An Israeli athlete was competing in a surfing competition somewhere in, I think, in the Basque country of Spain. And they couldn't expel this guy, so they just cancelled the surfing competition. Yeah. Increasingly, all over the world, people are going, Israel, ew. Now, what does that look like? Well, it looks like, at the moment in the UK, and I reckon this is my favourite BDS action. Like, Starbucks and McDonald's, all fantastic. But Gal Greenstein, Wonder Woman, this murderous genocide supporting woman, she starred in Snow White. And we said, don't watch Snow White, boycott Marvel, la la la. And the film tanked and lost $100 million. And some brainiac said, I've got a new film, let's cast Gal Gadot. And she's filming in the UK now, and there's crew that are staked out the front of the makeup person's house, in front of the costume person's hotel. They're at wherever she's staying, and they follow them to find the movie set. And as soon as the guy goes, and action, they start, free, free Palestine, free, free, so that they can't actually shoot the movie. Now, the next time, so Snow White loses $100 million. This thing's going to lose millions, because the cost of filming and set design and audio and all that stuff is just getting burnt because they have platformed this woman. In a year from now, somebody's going to go, I've got a great script, Faris. I think we should cast Gal Gadot. What do you think the studio executives are going to say? Are you effing stupid? Have you seen what's happened? She loses money. Now, I'm using that as a metaphor to the extrapolation of. You imagine, like the direct action crew, the amazing direct action crew in the UK, and they're spray painting Barclays Bank, and they're breaking into Albert factories, and they're doing those really putting their own liberty on the line for Palestine, using their privilege as allies to really make a direct cost to the complicity in the genocide and the occupation and oppression of Palestinians. You imagine, not Barclays, maybe Citibank, maybe it's the Bank of Australia, one of these banks, and they're looking for an IT platform. And the procurement guy or COO comes in and says, great news, board, we've put the security platform to tender. And we've got a company from Taiwan, and they did Citibank, and we've got a company from Singapore, and they did Bank of America, and we've got a company from Tel Aviv, and they did Barclays. The board is making, well, it's looking at those three, and I can assure you that they're saying, can I look at the Singaporean and the Taiwanese options? And they are precluding, soft boycott, soft divestment, the Israeli stuff, because they're going, what is going to be the cost if we partner an Israeli company? Are we going to get a university sit-in? Are we going to get a Barclays style direct action? What is going to be the cost? If it's apple for apple, why would we take this apple, which is associated with and tainted by the genocide, but also by this movement for Palestine that's growing every day and what they might do? And that cost of keeping Israel propped up is becoming increasingly expensive. And at some point, the West is just going to wash its hands of it. And that's our job, is to continue making it expensive to be Israel's friend.
Yeah. Just a point on Gal Gadot. She must be an industry plant, because even before this, support for genocide, outward support for genocide,
she's a shit actress. She's no good.
She's a bottomless pit of talent and charisma. There's nothing valuable about her.
But she's a black hole. She actually sucks energy out of the joint.
She's terrible. And she must be an industry plant. And the fact that, you're right, it is becoming more expensive, but the Western governments are still attempting to shift the blame away from Israel and onto some particular individuals. Like you said earlier, the Australian government, as well as the UK government, some other governments, they sanctioned these two individuals who, they're right-wing fanatics who barely ever leave, the settlements in the West Bank or wherever the hell they live, the stolen land that they live on. It's very clearly just symbolic, and they're still attempting to save the state of Israel from itself. But we are getting to the stage, and if we continue to uphold the momentum, we can get to the stage where, as you said, the Israelis or the West would, dismiss or abandon the cancerous Zionist entity. I wanted to ask you about the kind of actions that take place in Australia. You mentioned the kind of lobbying that you do, and you also mentioned the Palestine Action Crew here in the UK, and they've done some brilliant work in terms of putting pressure on governments. And you mentioned that they put their liberty on the line, and they are even getting charged with terrorism charges right now. So it's not even that they're spending time in prison and they're not allowed to leave, and it's all obviously to crack down on the opposition to genocide and Holocaust. They're also facing terrorism charges. But is there anything similar to that in Australia?
So we haven't had these the concerted campaign against the banks from a direct action point of view. There has been crew that has spray painted like the not the American embassy, because you can't get anywhere near the American embassy or the Israeli embassy, but like the offices of, so the embassy sits in Canberra, where our capital city is, but they have spray painted MP offices, and they've blockaded, the ports. There've been, guys and girls in canoes that have surrounded ships, Zim ships. So there's been a number of direct actions. Nothing as we've got an Albert office here. We don't have any Albert factories in the sense of production, and they've been very assiduous in hiding themselves. But some crew found out where the Albert head office is in Australia. The Victorian government, the state that I'm in, cancelled their memorandum of understanding with Albert. A couple of the universities have as well. So the pressure is increasing. Yeah. A couple of the universities here have not renewed their programs with, like, the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and etc. The University of WA, or Curtin University in WA, has ended relationships with some funding agreements with the State of Israel. There was a university here in Victoria, RMIT, that did had a grant thing going with Albert, and that got ended. So the boycott stuff is increasing slowly but surely. We had the Sydney Festival, which was a music festival that we called a boycott on. The Israeli embassy had put $20,000 as a sponsor. And we all but shut that thing down. Yeah, artists withdrew, workers withdrew. There was an event in Brisbane for Australia, and the staff in that hotel refused to work. Got blockaded. So increasingly, we are getting the actions are getting ratcheted up, and it's very, very important from our point of view, from the movement's point of view, is to attach our actions to complicity, not identity. Yeah, because many of our actions involve Jewish siblings, Jewish brothers and sisters. This is not about Jews, not about Judaism. And one of the things that I've often said is, Palestinians would resist Sikhs if they occupied us, Hindus if they occupied us. If Martians came and occupied us, we'd find a way to get to Mars.
Yeah, also, we'd resist Muslims if they occupied us.
Yeah, as we did against the Ottomans. We're 400 years of the Ottomans, and we weren't happy with that. With the benefit of hindsight, I'd rather a bit of that than this. But anyway.
Some discussion about whether or not it was the right decision for the Arabs to...
No, our right decision is for us to have self-determination. And that extends not just to us, but also to the Kurds that are under Ottoman occupation, we have to hold ourselves to the highest of moral standards, because that is what grows a movement, brings people to you. If we are selective in our humanity, if we are selective in our morality, then we are no better. We are no better than Zionists. We must be better. We must be a beacon of... Habibi, I don't know if you ever got to meet your grandmother or grandfather, Ali Yarhamhum, but I've heard stories of our grandmothers nursing Jewish children, breastfeeding Jewish children that had survived the Holocaust, had been ethnically cleansed themselves from Europe. Our people, indigenous people, wherever they are full of love, are full of love. That's who we are. Zionists can't understand why we haven't given up. And because their minds are so corrupted with this supremacy, they think that we will do the same to them. So we have to bash them, because if they get supremacy on us, they'll do it to us. I mean, they don't realize that's not what we did. When they came in waves in the 30s and the 40s, that's not what we did. We didn't resist Zionists in the 30s. We resisted the British for not giving us our self-determination, for oppressing us. It wasn't a movement. The 36 wasn't against Zionism. 36 was against the British. We were fighting the notion that they were allowing untold immigration and giving them opportunity and support at our expense. But our fight wasn't with them. It was with the system, with the British, the bastards, which is why we hate the UK. And why, when they chopped the head off, they tore up the poster of Balfour in, I think it was Edinburgh University. It was fantastic. It was that's one of my favorite actions. That and Gal Gadot.
I agree with you in terms of, this is not about religion. It's not about an identity of a Jewish person. And kind of, not on the flip side, but there needs to be an acknowledgement that there are Jewish spaces that host Zionist activity, and it's not our fault that they do so. For example, there are synagogues, not all of them, but there are synagogues that host, I think it was in Canada, they host auctions for stolen Palestinian land.
Of course.
Right? It's not my fault it's in a synagogue, right? Mm-hmm. It's not my fault that the Zionist entity purports to be the Jewish state. It says it's doing what it's doing on behalf of Jews. It's not true, right? But this is fundamentally how they view themselves, and they've co-opted the Jewish religion and Jewish institutions to be complicit in the Holocaust and the ethnic cleansing and the genocide of the Palestinian people. And when a Jewish institution, or purportedly Jewish institution, is questioned or is criticized for action, or for the what they say about Palestine and what they say about the Holocaust of the Palestinians in Gaza, it's not because they're Jewish, it's because they support genocide. And these are things that need to be separated.
It's not our fault that a person stole our land and then said it was because of their religion. That's not our fault. And then that they used that notion of that religion to then oppress us. And then they built a state around that religion to continue to oppress us and genocide us. That's not on us. That's on them, 100%. But we also have to be conscious that we live in a world where our messaging, this is a proactive action. Yeah, Faris? I mean, how many people are going to see this podcast? Inshallah, 6 billion people, yeah? Inshallah. But the reality is it's going to sit in a silo with people who might be enthused by my accent, yeah? And, my mum will watch it and your mum will watch it, and who knows who else will watch it. But this is a proactive outlet, what we're doing now. The reality is, I spoke before, and this is our job in the West as advocates for Palestine, is the people that have seen what they've seen and said, yeah, get them. People who've seen what they've seen and gone, I'm on your side. And then the people who've seen what they've seen and gone, that's terrible. I don't think I can do anything about it. I don't want to think about it. Now, our job is to get to them. What the Zionists have done is created what I call the unholy trinity. In Christianity, the holy trinity is the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. As Muslims, we don't believe that God can have 3 identities. There is only one God, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the unholy trinity. In Israel, we have the holy trinity, in Christianity. The unholy trinity is Israel, geography, Zionism, political ideology, Judaism, religion. And they've made a unity over Zionism, Israel, and Judaism. And so if you criticize any of them, you're an anti-Semite. I mean, the state's actions are not reflective of a religion. The geography is for humanity. At the moment, more than 50% of people in the geography from the river to the sea are not Jewish. And the religion is the forefront of our religion. And it says, love thy neighbor. Don't murder, don't kill, don't steal, which is everything that Israel doesn't do. It does the absolute opposite of it. Now, in the West where we are, and those people that are going, that's horrible, but I don't know if there's anything I can do about it. Our job is not to fall into the trap, the Zionist trap, the narrative they have. And the only time we get called onto the media is when they want us to condemn Hamas. Can you believe? And so in that space where we are speaking to those people, we are reacting. And so our job is to be in those spaces and find the capacity to bring them on board and to disassociate ourselves from any of the stereotypes they might have in their head about us, about our movement, but also to break the bond between the racist, genocidal ideology and a religion that in its purest form sees them as holy as us, yeah? And so we need to break that. And it's so very important that we don't fall into that trap. Now, we can have nuanced conversations, you and I, in the silo that we're in. But in that other space, our job as advocates, our job as leaders of movements, etc., is to bring people to us. And the way to do that is to be clear. This is not about Benjamin Netanyahu. This is one of the things they're doing. Chuck Schumer in the United States saying Netanyahu, he's a Democrat. This is a Netanyahu problem. It's not a Netanyahu problem. Like, you take Netanyahu out, whoever's next is just as bad. This is a Zionism problem, a political ideology that's predicated on the destruction of indigenous people and the elevation of one people over another in a white supremacist ideology. If you're a Jew, there are three types of Jew in Palestine. Yeah, your Ashkenazi, which is top of the tree, the Sephardic are number two, and then the Ethiopians are number three. And they're all competing to go up to number one and kicking everybody beneath them. And the Druze and the Bedouins that are 4 and 5, let alone a Palestinian that might be fair and look like, so they can sneak as number 5 Israeli, quote unquote, citizen of that shit state. Then you get down to the Palestinians, yeah? Yilanhum. I mean, they are the most racist, even against each other. The Ashkenazis won't go anywhere near a Yemeni. I mean, when the Yemenis first came to Palestine, for years, they took their babies off them at birth and said, your kid died, to try and make them white. Exactly what the Canadians did, exactly what the Australians did, exactly what the New Zealanders did, because they're settler colonies. They wanted to take these kids and turn them white. When the Ethiopian Jews came, for years, the doctors go, we've got to give you some medicine to the women, and they were sterilizing the women because they didn't want black Jews, because it's a racist shithole. There's no other word for it. And now the world knows. The world knows this is not self-defense. On October 8, Israel could have asked for anything. On October 8, Israel could have asked for anything. We were done on October 8. On October 8, they could have said, now you understand why we have to move them all out. We're not going to do anything. You guys need to come and fix this, because look what they did. They beheaded 40 babies. They raped our women systematically. They came to a music concert. I mean, a music concert on the edge of a concentration camp. You know, what sort of people are you? Yeah. They've put babies in ovens. They cut a breast off a woman and used it as a football. You've got to come. And the world had so much sympathy for them. On October 8, October 9, October 10, October, November 23, December 23.
Even after thousands of Palestinian deaths.
It's June 25. No normal person calls this self-defense. Over and above which, when the Prime Minister says, Amalek, these are Amaleks, destroy them. And the story, the Old Testament story out of the Torah, is don't leave a child, don't leave a donkey. Don't leave a donkey. Yeah, these are not, and the defense minister says we are dealing with human animals. I mean, this is not Benjamin Netanyahu. This is Zionism manifest, white supremacy and hate. This is the Ku Klux Klan. This is the Crusades. This is every sort of maniacal hatred you've ever imagined in the world, but pumped up because they learned from everybody else. This is the supremest of hates, Zionism. Which is why the world needs to end it.
And on that very descriptive summary of the evil that is the Zionist ideology, I think we'll have to end. It's been an absolute pleasure, Nasser. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Harry.